turned the truckers away because they'd come pretty far for this?
I don't know how to even answer that question. I guess if there was barricades in place, how could we have done that?
And no one from the convoy organizers, to your knowledge, was on social media before the convoy encouraging antisocial behavior?
Not to my knowledge.
Right. And you've seen the Lawton book about the Freedom Convoy?
I have, yes.
And in his book, he says that the convoy organizers did not intend to be on residential streets.
Yes.
And you would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
But in fact, that is what happened.
There was some residential streets that had lots of trucks on them, yes, sir.
There were staging areas, but they were too far away from Parliament, and people wanted to be closer, correct?
A lot of them did want to be closer, but there was also trucks that were out there too in those locations, yes.
And you've been very clear in the affidavit you filed in court that there were truckers who came from all over.
Yes, sir.
And you indicated specifically in that affidavit, which is, we don't need to call it up, but for the record, it's JCF 0012 in paragraph 2 and 3, that you did not control the truckers. Those are your words.
Yes, no, we didn't. They're all human beings. I don't control anyone, sir. I open up a dialogue with them and listen.
You're agreeing with me?
I didn't control anyone.
I'm sorry?
I did not control anyone.
You didn't control the truckers?
No.
And Superintendent Drummond attended a meeting he's heard with some of your representatives on the 13th of February. That was after the date of your letter with the mayor. Those were on the 12th, correct?
The meeting, oh yes, sorry, the initial meeting was, I believe, Friday. Yeah, and so yes, correct.
Okay, and so the agreement with the mayor was reached on the 12th of February?
I believe so, the 12th.
And then we saw that there was a meeting on the 13th that I believe Mr. Wilson may have attended with the mayor's
yes, I believe so.
office. And Superintendent Drummond records in his notes, and again, I'll give you the reference, but in the interest of time, I won't call it up, but it's OPS 14455 at page 47. The convoy organizers, the representatives at that meeting, explained that they did not control Rideau, Sussex.
I wasn't at that meeting.
But you're aware that that was said
yes.
At that, okay. And that your representatives also said they didn't control Coventry Road.
Yes.
And they also said they could not be certain if the truckers there would move.
That's correct, I believe, yeah.
And even for those groups whom you did have some control or influence on, I guess influence, we've heard that truckers are pretty independent-minded people.
Yes, they are.
They can't be made to do what they don't want to do.
Yeah, I guess so.
And in addition to not controlling the truckers, you also did not have control, obviously, of the protesters on the street and whether they could block trucks moving, for instance.
We didn't have control, but we worked very hard and very diligently with the gentlemen and women that were down there to open up a dialogue and assist them in opening up that intersection.
And in fact, we heard about a previous effort by Mr. Wilson and Ms. Chipiuk on February 10th at Rideau and Sussex, where police were going to move the barriers so trucks could move, but the crowd dynamics got in the way and the crowd stopped the trucks from moving because they didn't trust the police, correct?
I was down there also, yes.
You were there as well.
Yes.
And so you saw that and you agreed that that would be dangerous then.
I didn't feel like it was dangerous. There was a large crowd presence there and I think they were feeling that they had been lied to by the police. There was a lot of mistrust there. And they were down there singing "O Canada" and chanting freedom.
And you agreed it would be dangerous to move the trucks in that scenario because the crowd swelled.
There was a lot of people there, yes, yes.
And we have heard that notice was given to the demonstrators in advance that they would have to leave. You heard that evidence?
Which what are you referring to?
You've heard quite a bit of that evidence that demonstrators were told to leave.
I've never been told to leave.
Oh, you didn't know that? Okay. You're familiar with the PLTs, correct?
I am now.
I'm going to show you some PLT logs, and you understand that the PLTs were a liaison with the protesters.
Excuse me, yes, sir.
And would communicate with them.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to call it up. I'm not going to start by taking you directly to it, but I will take you to a particular passage. The document is OPS 130-14053. And so while that's being called up, Ms. Leach, those are PLT logs as of February 25th. And I can take you through them in detail and show you, but in order to save some time, I'm going to attempt to summarize what they say on the issue of notice that was given to the truckers and protesters before the public order unit moved in to clear the intersection. And so what I see in those is on February, there were various zones in the city, and I see on February 16th, the PLTs attended SJAM and gave those present the letter, and were told by protesters that the letter wasn't legal because it didn't have a signature. Sounds sort of similar to what you said. Correct?
Sorry, just excuse me a minute. Yes.
If my friend could actually take the witness to the part in the document that states that so that we can see it. I don't know if that's what it says or not. I apologize.
I will take her to it where it's necessary. If she doesn't agree, she doesn't agree. That's fine. I don't wish to use my 15 minutes by going through the document in detail. If she can't agree, I will take her to portions of it.
Sure, let's do that. Take me to portions, please.
PLT say they attended SJAM and they were told by the truckers that it wasn't legal, that notice, and it wasn't significant. Do you know about that?
I wasn't there, sir.
Okay. Do you have any reason to deny that occurred, as noted in the PLT logs?
I have no reason to.
Okay. And understand from those logs that the next day, on February 17th, they attended again and delivered the message again. And they attended again on the 19th and delivered it again to those who remained. Any reason to deny that that occurred?
I was not there. As a matter of fact, by the 19th, I was already in jail.
Okay. And so you weren't on the 17th, were you?
I was arrested that day, yes.
Right. And I'm pretty confident, because you were one of the organizers, that the truckers were communicating with you and telling you what was happening.
From SJAM?
All over the city.
No, not necessarily.
And then in Zone 2, and this is on page 7 of the same document, Mr. Marazzo met the PLT on the 16th, and the message was delivered to him, and then it was delivered on Wellington Street, and the PLTs described hostile and screaming at the police, and the police then had to withdraw due to the hostility. Any reason to disagree with that?
I was not present there, sir.
Any reason to disagree with it?
Sir, with respect, my friend's asking a witness who has no knowledge of something whether or not she disagrees with a document of which she didn't draft, of which was drafted by the police, and then asking if there's any reason to disagree with something she has no knowledge of. That's not a question, sir, that's permissible. It's not relevant. This witness, while this was all going on, was in jail without any form of ability to access phones and texts, etc. It's not an appropriate line of questioning.
The witness can answer if she was aware of it or not. She wasn't. I think it's quite proper cross-examination.
I'm not sure it's very helpful in the sense that I'm not sure what you're getting at. She can neither confirm nor deny because she has no knowledge. Right. To say, has she any, the questions relating to whether she received communications about any of this may have some relevance, and she's answered that. So
Well,
I mean, you can go ahead, but
in my submission, it is highly relevant because the witness said that no notice was given. And I'm going to suggest to you, Ms. Leach, that the PLTs went to every single site and gave notice to everyone. And you're saying you didn't know that. Is that right?
If you say so.
Okay. I'm going to ask that we turn up OPS 12205, page 60. Yeah, just at the top where it says Swiss Hotel. I'm going to tell you something, and maybe you'll remember this, Ms. Leach. PLT Peace Jim and OPS PLT Meg attended Swiss Hotel and met with Leach and Bulford and O'Connor. Message was delivered and explained. All parties were upset, and Leach was crying in regards to how unfair she felt this action was. PLT advised them to depart and message this out to others. All parties were upset when it was explained that people who are helping logistics can also be charged and held accountable. All understood messaging. They do feel that this message will harden participants' resolve as they feel that it is a tactic of dictatorial government. Suggestion was made to have children leave the red zone. Seems pretty clear to me that you were given the message, right?
I was never told I needed to leave.
So the PLTs, that's fabricated.
I remember when they came in and we had the discussion, and I, as it says, became very upset. I believe I said something to the effect of, I cannot believe that you're about to do this to your own people. We were there protesting peacefully, and the rest of that interaction, I was upset and I was crying, and I
Right.
don't recall the
You
rest
were
of it.
upset and you were crying because it was over and they told you to leave.
I was upset and I was crying because of what they were proposing to do to Canadian citizens.
And they told you to depart and they told you to message that to others.
I don't
Right.
recall them telling me to message that to others or that I needed to leave.
I'm sorry, you don't
It was
remember?
suggested.
It seems to me your memory is selective. When I take you to something that implicates you, you have no memory of it.
That's inflammatory, and if my friend wants to take the stand and become a witness and give opinions about credibility, that's fine, but that's not a proper question, sir.
I'll move on. You would agree, you've talked about the fact that you didn't know the truckers or control them, and you didn't police them.
I did not know.
You weren't surveilling them.
No,
You didn't know their past. You didn't have intelligence information about all of them.
I am not an intelligence expert now.
Right. And you would agree with me that there may be other individuals or organizations that would have more intelligence information about some of the protesters than you did.
Such as,
Would you agree with that?
could you ask me your question again, sir?
Yeah. I said you would agree with me that there may be other individuals or organizations that would have more intelligence information about some of the protesters than you did.
Yes.
And you would agree with me as well that you have no background or formal training in crowd dynamics and what can incite a crowd to take action,
I don't know.
or how to prevent a crowd from escalating or preventing violence.
No, I don't.
And so just two more areas, if I may just have 2 more minutes, Commissioner. HRF 401510. If I may have that document, Mr. Clerk, please. Is an email from Eva Chipyuk. Eva Chipyuk was one of the convoy lawyers.
Yes, sir.
And so this is on February 15th. She indicates, and for some reason we have not been given the attachment, although we've been told that solicitor-client privilege was waived. But in the email it says, I've drafted something on the right to protest and have taken a very cautious approach because I don't exactly know what the emergencies orders are. But it's my understanding that they can limit the right to protest. And while that can be challenged in court, at the moment, people who do not comply may be arrested. I think if we're advising people, it's important to let them know all the risks they're facing and let them make their own decision. You've seen that from one of your lawyers?
I've seen it since in these hearings.
So, two possibilities. Either your lawyers didn't give that advice to you, or they did give that advice to you.
Sir, there's individuals CC'd or that emails too. She's not in it. And then the next day, or just in 2 days, she's not, you should first ask her if she got the email. God, sorry.
I'm sorry, my friend will have a chance to examine. This is quite proper cross-examination.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to know if she received the email before you question her on it.
Okay, I will get to that, but there's a reason why I'm asking it in the way I have.
Okay.
So, two possibilities. Either your lawyer didn't give you that advice, or you did get that advice from someone.
I did not receive this email, and I don't recall. As I said, there was a lot of chaos. We had a lot of conversations. I can't recall.
Okay, so you don't recall whether your lawyer gave you that email or not?
I don't believe I've seen it before.
Okay. And I understand that you've been charged with several criminal code offenses, correct? Mischief, obstructing justice, counseling others to commit mischief, intimidation, correct?
That's correct.
And I understand, you understand that the purpose of this inquiry is not to determine your guilt or innocence, correct?
Of course not.
And you've received disclosure of documents from the Crown, or partial disclosure, I believe you said?
Yes, I have.
And you understand, because the criminal process is ongoing, there's a case called WAG. And so as a result of that, you understand that I am not allowed to rely on documents that are part of the criminal brief, the Crown brief in this proceeding. You understand that, correct?
If you say so. Again, this is a new world to me.
And so you understand that if that's the case, I may not be able to challenge some of the statements you've said.
Sir,
correct?
my friend's arguing a principle of law.
I am not familiar with this system, so.
Okay. If I may just ask one final question then. You talked about concerns for safety, correct?
Yes,
And that would include concerns for officer safety?
absolutely.
And so we've heard evidence of police officers being swarmed by protesters, and I assume that you would be concerned about that.
I never witnessed that, but I would be concerned.
Right. But you don't have sufficient control over the truckers or the protesters to prevent that, if that's occurring,
I
correct?
don't control anyone, sir.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
answering my questions.
Thank you. Next is counsel for former Chief Slowly.
Sure, Ms. Leach, Tom Curry for former Chief Slowly.
Good morning, Mr.
I just have a
Curry.
few questions.
Yes, sir.
Can I just show you the one thing that my friend for the Ottawa Police Service was speaking to you about, just so that you have the full picture?
Yes, sir.
Could I ask, please, Mr. Registrar of the Witness, to be shown HRF 401520? I think this is the attachment that was referred to. Just in case this helps your recollection, what is being projected now is a document with the title, The Right to Protest. And have you seen it? I appreciate you're going to take a second to look at it, but just let us know, please, if you have seen that memorandum before.
I don't recall seeing this attachment, no, sir.
Okay. And I gather from the record that it is the attachment to which Ms. Chipiuk's email, or that was along with Ms. Chipiuk's email, and refers to the limits of the right to protest that were expressed in that cover. But that's not something that you saw or heard of.
I don't believe so, no. It does not look familiar.
Thank you. just a couple of things, and if I could, the commissioner, one of the things that the commissioner has to consider is recommendations about dealing with the Emergencies Act and presumably perhaps even the right to protest and some of the limits that we've heard about. Could I just have a couple of additional facts from you? You and Mr. Barber met, I think you told us, on the 24th of January to begin the trip
Yes, that is correct.
here,
Yes.
and you left from Redcliffe.
Redcliffe, Alberta, yes.
And arriving in Arnprior the 29th.
We got into Arnprior the evening of the 28th, I believe, the Friday evening. I believe that was the 28th.
28th, Ottawa the 29th.
Yes, sir.
And what I'm interested in knowing is, of course, first of all, the numbers of protesters exceeded your expectations. Is that fair?
Yes.
Wildly exceeded?
Yes.
And I think you told us that you imagined that you might be able to raise $20,000 for this convoy, and of course the financial commitments that you garnered were far in excess of that. But then in terms of the numbers of protesters who you considered, and I presume Mr. Barber considered in his conversations with you, were not in the numbers that filled up the streets of Ottawa in the way that you found them on the 29th. Is that fair?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. Your expectation when you got to Ottawa, you saw far more people than you believed would be in attendance.
Yes.
And am I right that you were not the person primarily or even at all communicating with police about how many people were going to attend?
I don't believe so. I know the road captains were in constant communication with law enforcement, though.
Got it. And insofar as you know, the road captains would have had some information about the numbers of members of their individual convoys that they had, but they would not have had a picture of the entirety of it because people were coming from far and wide. Is that fair?
We tried every day to get solid numbers, and with people joining and leaving, some people would travel with us for 200 kilometers. Some people would travel across the province and turn around. It was very challenging, and as much as we tried to get a count, it was next to impossible.
So much so that when you got here, as much as you tried to understand how many would be there, you missed the mark.
Yes.
Now, then, just a couple of other things. In terms of the company, the not-for-profit, it was incorporated January 30th, I understand?
I think it was the 30th or the 31st, but it was right around there, yes, sir.
And then I think in the record, the bylaws that organize it were prepared by February 3rd. So that was the company and the governance model that you had imposed was evolving only once you got here.
Yes. Yes.
Then finally, in terms of the description, I mean, you and Mr. Wilson have both called the scene chaotic. Can you tell the commissioner when did you first appreciate the sense of chaos that you have described? Was it when you arrived on the 29th?
It was sitting on my kitchen table when we were organizing, and because I had messages coming in and emails coming in and phone calls, and it was very busy times.
Right.
Very busy times.
And so by the time you got here and saw the situation in Ottawa, was it chaotic at that time as well?
There were times when it was chaotic. As you referred to, there was a lot of people here. When we got into town, I just saw a lot of smiles and a lot of flags and people hugging each other. But there was, yeah. So I don't necessarily mean chaotic all the time as a negative term, but it was, a mixture of both.
Understood. Just one last thing. I think one of the questions that you were asked about what would have happened as you approached Ottawa if the city had been, I think the language was blocked or barricaded. Having regard to the numbers of people coming far and wide and your inability to control them, is the likelihood that those convoy protesters would have just made their protest where the blockades were?
Again, that's kind of a what-if question that I can't really speak to. I don't know.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next is the City of Ottawa.
Alyssa Tompkins for the city. The city has no questions for this witness.
Thank you. Ontario Provincial Police.
Good morning, Commissioner. The OPP have no questions. Thank you.
Democracy Fund, JCCF, Citizens for Freedom.
Morning, Mr. Commissioner, Ms. Lich.
Good
My name's
morning.
Antoine Dailly, Council to Citizens for Freedom, representing peaceful protesters in Windsor. Ms. Lich, in yesterday's testimony, you indicated that at the beginning you were tasked with some of the fundraising and that you thought that a fundraising goal of $200,000 was way too much and that you expected maybe $20,000 in donations. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that you certainly did not expect the level of financial support that the convoy did receive over that period of time. Is that
I
correct?
think we were all quite shocked about that, yes.
Perfect. Do you agree that many Canadians who were unable or otherwise unwilling to go out and protest in the streets instead donated to the convoy as a tangible demonstration of their opposition to the government mandates?
I do, and I remember saying, I think it was maybe to Mr. Wilson, that it wasn't even about the money, it was about the statement behind the money.
Right. And so is it also your understanding that contributors to a GoFundMe campaign may leave a message of support when they donate?
Yes,
And did you review some of those statements of support?
very briefly, I did scroll through some, yes.
But so then, based on your experience, would it be fair then to characterize the act of donating to the convoy's fundraising efforts as a form of political expression?
I would. And encouragement and support. I think as it grew, people wanted to be a part of it in any way that they could show support. And that was one way that people that couldn't attend or be on an overpass or drive to the side of the highway were able to support.
Understood. And is it true that the GoFundMe campaign for the convoy was active for less than a month?
Yes, it was.
And were you ever made aware that the convoy's fundraising campaign in that limited amount of time enjoyed more donations from more Canadians than the Liberal Party of Canada did in either 2020 or 2021?
I believe somebody had mentioned that.
So we're
Yes.
talking about large amounts of
Yes.
money here, right?
Yes.
And are you aware of any other grassroots fundraising campaign which has raised comparable amounts of money since March of 2022?
Not to my knowledge, but I haven't also looked any up.
Fair enough.
Yes.
And lastly, we heard about some of the conditions and restrictions that you are now subject to while you wait for your trial next year. In addition to those conditions, how many days have you spent in jail since you started fundraising for the convoy?
49 days in total.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and now for the convoy organizers.
Sir, I'm wondering if we can take the morning break a little early. I have to talk to 3 separate lawyers behind me about certain areas of examination. If we could take the morning break, I'd be very much appreciative.
Only to have a focused questioning so that it's useful use of the break.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, well, we'll take the break early then. Take 15 minutes, please.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission est levée pour 15 minutes. The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Okay. The convoy organizers.
Good morning. For the record, Brendan Miller appearing as counsel for Freedom Corp, and I think you know who I am as I'm your lawyer.
Good morning.
So I just want to start out with some just general question. At any time during the protest, had you been given a court order injunction to move the trucks or leave or what have you, what would you have done and how would you have acted?
I would have obviously followed the injunction. I never intended or came here to break the law. I would have asked if there was a way that we could remain, if there was anything that we could work out so that we could remain and continue our protest.
Okay. And you heard yesterday the evidence from Mr. Dichter, did you not?
I heard some of it, yes.
Right. And he testified about not knowing about the deal that the Convoy Corp or Freedom Corp and the board were going to enter into with the city. Do you have any comment about that?
I believe he was obviously not able to attend because he was in a cast, but I believe we had dialed him in on the phone to be present at that meeting.
Right. And so at that meeting, what was discussed?
I believe that was the deal with the mayor.
Okay. And what, if any, board members objected to the dealings with the mayor?
I don't recall anybody objecting to it.
Yeah. And you heard him give evidence that the board members were scared of the lawyers and what they were dealing with. Do you have any comment in that respect?
That was news to me.
Okay. Have any of the other board members expressed such a fear to you?
No.
Okay, thank you. My friend, Mr. Champ, discussed with you at length the injunction, when you should have known you should leave. And though I haven't given notice of this, I'd like to bring up document HR 073, which is the injunction order from February 7th. And if we could just scroll down to the terms. Right, and so if I can just direct you to paragraph 7 of the injunction. Can you read that?
Yes, sir.
And what's your understanding of the injunction in this order at the time when it was obtained?
My understanding was that so long as we remained peaceful and complied with the order, we were permitted to stay.
Right. And then there was a subsequent order, and I understand that term, which states that provided the terms are complied with, the defendants or other persons remain at liberty to engage in peaceful, lawful, and safe protest. I take it that that term was in that order too. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that, sorry.
I apologize, I'll speak up. The term at term 7 there, where it says that it's provided the terms of the order are complied with, the defendants and other persons remain at liberty to engage in peaceful, lawful, and safe protest. I take it that was in the following injunction order as well. Is that right?
I believe so, and I think that was February 16th, but I'm not sure.
Thank you. And so my friend with the Government of Canada discussed with you what your knowledge was of violent offenses, et cetera, that was going on in Ottawa at the time. If Mr. Register could bring up the document we just discussed, POE.HRF, a whole bunch of zeros, 2. If we could just rotate that. And so the coloring on this is gone, and this is already in evidence, but between the date of the beginning of the protest and the invocation of the Emergencies Act, there was a total of 4 violent offenses individuals were charged with in that time period. Did you know any of those individuals?
I did not.
Okay. Did you hear about individuals being charged with violent offenses?
Since the convoy.
Okay. And my friend had asked you questions about some of the statements that have been given in this proceeding, as well as in the media, about all these awful things that happen to people. And you've been here for this entire time. Have you heard from any witness that they, in fact, were the victim of an assault or witnessed an assault or anything violent?
The only thing that I've seen and heard was not violence on the behalf of protesters. It was the video footage that I saw when the crackdown came.
Could you agree that if there were victims of actual violence, given that they know who's charged, it would have been relatively easy for those witnesses to be procured to testify before this commission?
David Mitchell.
I withdraw.
For the
Withdraw.
Ottawa Police.
I withdraw. Now, I just want to talk with you about the letter and some of the reactions that you got from some of the protesters. Of course, we know that Mr. Dichter didn't appear to like the letter, and Mr. King didn't appear to like the letter. What was your general responses that you were getting at the time with respect to the letter and the deal that was going to be done through the city?
Well, I can't speak to other places. I know that we printed off that letter, and I went out to 88 and spoke with the gentleman that owned the property out there, and some of the truckers that were there. Their response was very positive. I think that everyone felt that, as I stated earlier, this was a step one.
Okay. And again, what was the sort of responses, though, that you were getting on the street from some of the truckers after that deal was announced?
I don't remember.
Can you remember if was there some negative responses? Was there some positive responses that you personally witnessed?
I didn't witness any negative responses, no.
Okay. And I understand that Mr. Marazzo, as you sat through his testimony, he stated that the purpose of the meeting and the goal of Freedom Corp and its board was not really to get a deal with the mayor. It was to a meeting with the mayor, but it was to get this deal to make things work peacefully. Can you elaborate on that?
Can you repeat that, please?
So the actual goal with respect to Freedom Corp, as well as the protesters that you were representing, their actual goal was not to achieve a meeting with the mayor, but it was to deal with this in a peaceful manner. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, well, that was obviously our goal, and again, to get the trucks off the residential streets. We were hoping to find a way that the trucks that did have to move their vehicles out of the city would be able to come back in and continue the protest. And again, we felt it was a step in the right direction, and meeting with the mayor was not one of my goals, but I thought, again, it was a way to open some dialogue with somebody in a position of authority.
Okay. And just on my last point here, part of this commission is about coming up with recommendations and things like that. I take it when you came into Ottawa, and we've heard evidence that a lot of the truckers were directed where to park, and that's where they kind of stayed throughout the proceeding or throughout the protest. Mm-hmm. And so there is this issue in what I refer to and what's referred to in some of the jurisprudence is a speaker's corner. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's a place, a location in a government area, particularly out front of Parliament or where have you, where protesters are permitted to go, and it's a designated area for protest.
Okay.
I take it when you were trying to get the protest moving, most of the protesters were wanting to get onto Wellington because it's in front of Parliament and they were protesting the federal government, fair?
Correct.
All right. And what is your understanding of the current state of Wellington today?
I believe it's blocked off.
Right. And if that area that's blocked off became a speaker's corner, where individuals at any time could go and protest the federal government, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that would be a good idea. I think Canadians have a right to exercise their democratic rights, and they have a right to have their voices heard.
Right. And my friends from the government of Canada put to you a whole bunch of evidence that you weren't familiar with until you got here with respect to threats. Can you elaborate on any of the threats you've received, ones that you know members of the protesters received, as well as the legal counsel and even any of the legal counsel in this room since this proceeding started?
I know, well, I heard when I was at the ARC that the ARC was receiving death threats against me, which is one of the reasons why I left that location. I have messages on my phone from an Instagram account from a young man that wanted to not just shoot me, but also shoot the rest of the protesters or the convoy organizers. I know that my criminal lawyer has received some very nasty emails. I believe Mr. Wilson has received death threats and threatening emails.
Right. And so it's fair to say then that there has been a lot of threats on both sides.
That's fair.
Okay. But do you know anybody who's made death threats to any of these individuals?
Of course not.
And when you walk in here every day for the past few days, there's a protester outside, and I'm sure you've heard everything she's been saying, and she's a counter-protester and is against your cause. What are the sort of things that protester has said to you while you've been coming in and out of this hearing?
Well, it's been very hard to hear because there's a lot of construction. I just hear her shouting my name a lot. I heard her say something, I think just now, about she can't wait till I go back to jail. But other than that, I haven't really.
Did she mention anything about terrorism?
I believe that's right on her sign.
And what's it say?
It says, "Go home, terrorists."
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any re-examination?
No, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, I just have one question. You were taken to a chart and told there were charges for violent offenses.
Yes.
Do you know who was charged? Do you know the
With
four people?
violent offenses?
Yeah, the four people.
I know I don't. Not that I can recall anyways.
So you don't know if it's someone you know or someone you don't know?
I do not, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for your testimony,
Thank you,
and
sir.
you're now free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that we move on to the next, which is the, I believe, the panel of two witnesses, and there's an issue to be discussed about as I understand it, the relevance of that.
Correct.
So maybe we'll deal with that now, if that's agreeable.
Sure, thank you very
Okay.
much. So I'll remain seated here, Commissioner.
That's fine. Just identify yourself, because it's the same. The reporters have to know who's speaking.
Sure, it's David Mijkowski, counsel for the Ottawa Police Service. We have a very real concern with respect to the witness panel of Chris Deering and Maggie Dingmer. I believe there is now a different name, and I apologize. It's Hope Braun, I believe. those two individuals, and our concern is essentially one of procedural fairness. Those two individuals were not on the list of witnesses provided by the commission. And so last Friday...
You mean they weren't on the original list?
Correct. And what we found out was on last Friday, October 28th at 12:37 p.m., we received an email from the commission saying that these two individuals would be called as witnesses and attaching two statements from these individuals. No information had been previously provided about these individuals or about the issues that they were going to testify about, which are the how their arrest was handled, nor were there any documents provided by the parties, including the Ottawa Police Service, about the manner of arrest. It appears that both of these individuals, from their statements, are going to give evidence about the circumstances of their arrest by unknown officers. I've been able to determine in one case that it was not an OPS officer, one of them, but we are trying to find out information. These are arrests that took place on February 18th after the invocation of the Emergencies Act. These individuals were not arrested pursuant to the Emergencies Act. They were arrested based on common law powers and the criminal code. And my concerns really are twofold. Firstly, the information we say is not relevant to your mandate under the Act. And the second question is one of procedural fairness. There were over 275 arrests made by the police in that period of February 18th to the 20th. None of the police witnesses were asked specifically about those arrests. No documents were requested. The last police witness who testified in this proceeding was on Wednesday, October 26th. Had those witness statements been provided prior to the completion of the police witnesses, then at the very least we could have asked our witnesses to provide evidence with respect to the arrest plan, with respect to the circumstances of the arrest of those two individuals and the other 275 people who were arrested. I am not faulting Commission Counsel. I understand that the statements were provided to them and they provided them to us immediately after. But it was 2 days after the last witness testified. Those statements were in the those were witnesses who are here represented by counsel. They had an obligation to produce documents. They chose, deliberately or otherwise, to not present that evidence and not allow me then to respond to it. And it's obvious that some of that information they had beforehand. And in fact, to add to the procedural unfairness, last night we received an email from counsel for the convoy organizers attaching 7 more videos that also would have existed that were not disclosed. There's no explanation for why the convoy organizers have not had to follow the same rules as everyone else. Those statements, even if they were relevant, and I don't concede that they are, should have been provided prior to police witnesses testifying. It creates a serious and irreparable breach of procedural fairness to have you left with 2 arrests out of 275, which I am unable to provide evidence in response to, both those specific arrests as well as the arrest plan in general. And there are, I say, 2 possible solutions. The first is to not allow that evidence to be heard. It's not relevant to your mandate. And even if it was, it would be very difficult to draw any conclusion from the evidence of 2 individuals out of 275 arrests when you've heard no evidence about any of the arrests of anyone else or the arrest plans or any explanation of those two particular arrests. Alternatively, if you are inclined to allow that panel to testify, including adding new documents that were not on the database and were provided last night, then the OPS must, we say as a matter of procedural fairness, be allowed the opportunity to call another witness to provide evidence about the arrest plans and the exercise of use of force options in connection with the exercise of police powers, generally and specifically with respect to the scene that the officers encountered on February 18th. You have not heard about what is involved when a public order unit has to exercise tactical options. The commission didn't lead this evidence, nor did we. Similarly, we didn't provide any documents surrounding those arrests. So while my first submission is that you should not allow this evidence, as an alternative, if you are inclined to do so, then I would ask for the opportunity to call evidence so that in fairness, the police witnesses can address what should have been put to them by the convoy organizers and which for some reason was not. Those are my only submissions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other council wish to make submissions?
In response, sir.
Okay, I'm just canvassing first. So you'd like, yes?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay. Go ahead.
Should I go ahead? Emily Tamman for
I take it you're supporting the proposal that or the objection?
That's right. Yeah, we agree. Just on behalf of the Ottawa Coalition of Residents and Businesses, we share the view conveyed by the Ottawa Police. We understand that the Commission is working under difficult constraints, and there have been limitations in Council's ability to get documents and other evidence to the parties in a timely manner. But in this case, we would agree that there is prejudice and that the evidence, at least as it pertains to the arrests, should not be admitted.
Thank you. Any other?
Yes, Commissioner, it's Chris Diana for the OPP. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the OPP agrees with the position of our friend, Mr. Michikowski, both the main position or the alternative position. At this point, we don't know if the OPP was involved or not in these incidents. And based on procedural fairness, we should that evidence either should not be permitted or we should have a chance to respond to it. I won't add anything further to the comments by my friend, but the OPP supports that position.
Okay. Any other submissions in support? Okay. And then, as I understand it, the convoy organizers are opposing.
We're of course in support of the witnesses testifying and all of the evidence being put before the commission. I'll deal first with the point of law my friend raises about relevance and materiality. With respect to the terms of reference under the order in council in this commission, this commission is to look at the efforts of police and other responders prior to and after the declaration. So with respect to whether or not there was police brutality or misconduct, etc., it's relevant and material within the terms of reference. Second, with respect to my friend's allegations of prejudice and it not being fair, with respect, they have not called a single victim or a single eyewitness to any of these purported violent crimes that they're trying to lay at the hands of the protesters as a collective. I don't see how our clients being able to find some witnesses of which they had no control of and which approached them in trying to be able to call actual evidence of actual violence that isn't just an assertion. And in my respectful view, it's relevant and material. If you find that there is some form of prejudice suffered, what my friend is essentially alleging is a violation of the rule of Brown and Dunn. If this was a court, that leaves the court with various remedies, and one is to permit the recalling of a witness in rebuttal. With respect to the rule of Brown and Dunn, I did put issues with respect to arrest, et cetera, directly to Chief Bell, who was in charge of the operation at the time, and acting and asking questions about what was actually done. We've now provided the videos of those actual arrests, and I understand that all the police agencies don't want that to be in the public eye. And with respect, I would submit that the public has a right to see these videos. It is in the public interest, and any prejudice is easily repairable by permitting my friends to call a rebuttal witness if they so choose. Subject to any questions, sir, those are my submissions.
Okay, and any other party is opposing the application?
Adam Pierre for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms.
Yes.
We support the Freedom Convoy organizers' position, and if I could just make a few points. So first, the terms of reference in the Emergencies Act do require investigating and looking into the appropriateness of the measures that were used. Interim Chief Bell testified that using emergency powers were used to create an exclusion zone, and then they relied on that authority. And so I would expect that these witnesses as arrestees would have evidence that would be relevant to the implementation of that authority. Also, to the extent that my friend made the point that these are but two arrestees of many, we did hear from two Ottawa residents who provided their experiences as examples, and that would then represent a broader class of individuals. So this would also be two arrestees providing their experiences, which would then be emblematic of others in a similar position. And I would just like to add on, my friend, Mr. Honor from the Democracy Fund provided submissions through email. He's not here. I would just briefly read it in just to provide his perspective as well. The Democracy Fund submitted that the evidence of these witnesses is relevant to the Commission's mandate. Specifically, the Commissioner has been directed to examine issues to the extent relevant relating to the efforts of police and other responders prior to and after the declaration. Superintendent Robert Bernier and others testified about the mission statement contained in the OPS operational plan of February 13th, which speaks to enforcing legislation with the, quote, utmost respect to the individual's Charter of Rights, end quote. There was evidence before the Commission that this plan evolved after the declaration of the Emergencies Act, and there was also evidence that the OPS found the powers available to them under the Emergencies Act to be useful. The Commission should hear evidence from these witnesses as it will speak to how police enforcement was carried out during the state of emergency from a protester perspective. If there are objections as to relevance as the evidence unfolds, those objections can be dealt with orally. If other witnesses need to be recalled, that decision can be made after the hearing of evidence from the witnesses in question. So that was Mr. Honor's submission, which the Justice Center also supports. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner,
Any other who are opposing or rather supporting the motion? Okay. Yes,
Mr. Commissioner, at some point, Commission Council would like to provide some points of context, but if you're still canvassing, we can wait until that's done.
Okay, you'd like to add something? Yes.
if I may, Commissioner Emily Tamman again for the record. I just wanted to respond to one point made by my friends regarding the absence of evidence with respect to residents of Ottawa who experienced violence in the convoy. And for the record, would just like to note again that the Ottawa Coalition was very limited in the time that was allocated to tell the story of residents of Ottawa. I would also note that there are many residents who continue to fear for their safety in being identified publicly as opposing the convoy. And with that said, I don't think it's appropriate to infer from the lack of evidence on that point that it didn't happen. And I would also note in response
I think you're getting into argument now. We're dealing with whether or not there is relevance to the evidence that's being tendered.
That's right, but one of the bases upon which it's being asserted that it is relevant is that there's been no evidence in relation to violence experienced by residents. And that's something that my friend put to Ms. Leach this morning, and also Mr. Miller noted it in his submission to you just now.
Okay, yes, Mr. Michikowski.
David Michikowski for
The one point I want to respond to that has not, with respect, been addressed by my friends, and which is highly problematic, I suggest, is the convoy lawyer has indicated that he put an issue with respect to an arrest to Chief Bell. And that is correct. However, he provided no information, no details, no indication of who it was, when it was. It came out of the air. And what makes that more problematic is that obviously that information was in his possession and there was no documentation provided beforehand. This was sprung after the police witnesses had already testified when we then got these statements. Had the rules been followed, that witness would have seen those statements, would have seen documents. We would have had the opportunity to put in documents and call evidence or ask to call evidence in response. The final point I note is that one of my friends indicated that several of the convoy witness, or several of the coalition's witnesses testified, and that is true. The difference is the rules were followed, and everybody knew before they testified what they were going to say. So the convoy organizers had procedural fairness, as did everybody else. In this case, there is a serious denial of procedural fairness, and that's what we say must be addressed. Thank you.
Okay. And Commission Counsel, you wanted to provide some context, and among other things, I don't know what the witnesses are going to say, so